Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Guten Rosh Chodesh Elul, which of course means that Rosh Hashanah is coming. It's just very stressful. Okay, we're learning Maseches Kiddushin, Daf Gimel, and we're starting toward the bottom of Daf Beis and Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. And we've been discussing the usage of the word derech in our Mishnah. We said b'shlosha drachim. B'shalosh drachim, I should say. We have to be very exacting with our words here. Every word is meduyak. And we were trying to figure out what the story is with the word drachim. So let's continue to analyze Beis and Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. V'haditnan, we have precedents for something that says drachim. B'zayin drachim bodkin es hazav. There are 7 ways that we're bodek the zav. Why don't we say lisnei dvarim? Why over there don't we use a different word of dvarim, which gets us away from the word that causes other dominoes to fall, which is drachim? Says the Gemara, no, there's a message to be taught there. The reason why drachim was used by Azav was because that if a person fresses a little bit too much, that could lead to a zav discharge. And as well, the darka de mishya yaser la'asui de ziva, and drinking too much liquid as well can lead to ziva. And therefore, we had to ensure that the word drachim was there to teach us that lesson. So no, we cannot swap out the word drachim by 7 things bring a zav toward a zav emission to dvarim. We have another case like this. Esrog shavel ilan begimel drachim. There we say that an esrog is similar to a tree. And we learned this a long time ago, no? This is in Maseches Rosh Hashanah and Sukkah. So the Gemara says over there that an esrog has similarities to a tree in 3 ways. Over there, why don't we say lisni dvarim? Why there does it say drachim? Says the Gemara, mishum deboinan masni seifa, because at the end of that Mishnah from Maseches Rosh Hashanah, what do we need to say? That the esrog is similar to a vegetable in 1 way. There, the word derech was specifically chosen. Okay, but why? Seifanami nisni davar. We should have said that in that little piece of Mishnah, we should have said b'davar echad. Says the Gemara, no. That the general derech of an esrog is like a vegetable. Ma yerek, just like by vegetables, darko digadil al kol mayim, that it needs to basically be watered. Take a look at Rashi. The second Rashi, he says that in regards to these things, with drawn water, kiyerek, like vegetables, that's how the esrogim need to grow. And back in the Gemara, and that by vegetables, that we establish meiser based on the time of lakita. The same is true. That we can use mayim she'uvim. We should use mayim she'uvim to grow an esrog b'shas lakita isuro. And here, of course, you can see darko that af esrog darko the gadol, teaching us trends, teaching us things, meaning there's something more than dvarim going on. Dvarim is a basic idea. Derech means that we're learning something more important. And therefore, we needed to have the word derech there also. And on Gimel Amud Aleph, 4 lines down, the Gemara says, wait 1 second. V'hadetnan koi, we know this animal of a koi or a kvi, different ways to pronounce it. This animal is a suffix chaya, suffix behema. We're not sure if the animal is considered a chaya or if it's a behema. So the Gemara here quotes a lot of variations on the theme. The Gemara says, yesh bo drachim shava l'chaya. There are some scenarios, drachim, derech, the key word that we're talking about, which is similar to a chaya, such as a sheep. V'yeshbo drachim shava lebehema. In some cases, the koi is similar to a behema. V'yeshbo drachim shava lechaya ulebehema. Sometimes it has features that's similar to both. V'yeshbo drachim she'eno shava lo lechaya v'lo lebehema. So there too, the Gemara wants to know. Again, we're not detailing in the Rishonim what each of these cases are. We're just showing the use of the word drachim, and we're asking nisni dvarim. Why is it that in the case of koi that we are not focusing in on the fact that it says drachim, let it say dvarim? So it says the Gemara Visu, and furthermore, I have another question for you. Hadetnan, we have a Mishnah. Zu achas min hadrachim sheshavu gitei nashem l'shichrurei avadim. We have another Mishnah, and this Mishnah is from Maseches Gittin, much earlier in the Masechta and Daf Tes. So there, the Gemara says that this is one of the ways that Gitei Nashim are similar to Shichrurei Avadim. So here too, we see the word drachim. There too, why didn't we say Nisnei Dvarim? Why didn't we say the word Dvarim there? And these two questions actually suffice to undermine our thinking over the last 20 or 30 lines, which is that we thought to say that drachim was to teach us something special in each case. By the esrog, it was to teach us X. By the previous case of Adzav, it was to teach us Y. So it says the Gemara that we went through a lot of the Mari Mekomos that speak about the word drachim, and we couldn't consistently apply that rule, because over here, we should have changed the word drachim, and we should have said dvarim. Ella, says the Gemara, why is it that our Mishnah used the word derech? So says the Gemara, Ella kol heichad ika plugta. When there are distinctions in halacha to be made, such as in our case, that there are multiple ways for a woman to be mekudeshes. She could be mekudeshes bekesef, ubishtar, ubebia. It's not one trick, it's multiple possibilities, multiple iterations. In cases like that, where there are multiple facets to a halacha, then tani drachim. That's why we see the word derech. And when there is no plukta, when there are no distinctions to be made within a halacha, when it is a single line halacha, so then we can expect the word dvarim. And the Gemara says, Dekanami, Dekatani Seifa. What do we have in our Mishnah? Rabbi Lazar Omer, Esrog Shavel Ilan L'chol Davar Shmamina. When Rabbi Lazar is comparing an Esrog to an Ilan, what does he say? They're all the same. What word does he use? Davar. Because whenever we have a case scenario where the halacha is very simple, it's one yesod, and it applies to every aspect of that area of halacha, so then we have to say that's where you can use the word davar. But when a halacha is multifaceted, it's layered. A person gets mikudeshes with kesef, shtar, and bia. So then the Gemara says that's when we use the word drachim. That explains our Mishnah. So at the end of the day, that is the reason as to why our Mishnah says what it says. And if we just glance back at the Mishnah just for a moment, we have done nothing more than analyze the first 4 words of the Mishnah, of Ha'isha niknes b'shalosh drachim. And now we know why each of these words are in place. We said Ha'isha because this is about her and not about him. We said niknes because there's a kinyan happening with kesef. And we said shalosh because it's feminine because of the word derech. And we said drachim because of the fact that it's a multi-layered Mishnah. Beautiful. Now we have a very, very clean understanding of our Mishnah. That brings us to the 2 dots, 2/3 of the way down on Gimel Amud Aleph. And there the Gemara says, Minyana de Reisha l'me'utei mai, Minyana de Seifa l'me'utei mai. In the beginning of our Mishnah, we had said that a woman can be niknes begimel drachim, and that she can be kona es atzma bebeis drachim. So whenever we have a number that's listed, we always have to ask ourselves what was being excluded. So it says the Gemara as follows. Minyana de Reisha, 7 lines from the bottom, l'me'utei chuppah. That you cannot get betrothed just by showing up to the chuppah. That does not work. We need a Maisa Kiddushin. So that is being excluded from the possibilities in our Mishnah. Namely, when our Mishnah says that there are 3 ways to get engaged, Kesef, Shtar, and Bia, one of the ways we don't get engaged is by chuppah. Doesn't work. So says the Gemara, that's not so simple that everybody says that. According to Rav Huna, we'll learn about this din a little bit later in a couple more blot. According to Rav Huna, who says that a chuppah does work for a kinyan of Kiddushin from a kal v'chomer. We don't know the kal v'chomer today. We'll learn it in a couple of days. Leme'ute mai. So what then does he say that the shalosh in our Mishnah is excluding? So says the Gemara on behalf of Rav Huna, Leme'ute chalipin. What's chalipin? So chalipin is where I take something like this. I say, listen, I'm going to make a kinyan on your behalf. You're going to take this from me. I own this. You pick it up. Show me that you're going to make a kinyan. And we do this replacement kinyan, where you're holding something external to the actual kinyan. And when you pick it up, we're all on the same page, and a kinyan can take place that way. No problem. So says the Gemara that on behalf of Rav Huna, what we're saying is that you cannot get married in Kiddushin this way. You cannot use chalipin. You cannot use a non-essential item to do the kinyan. So let's say a handkerchief, whatever, that doesn't work. Sal kadaita chamina, I might have thought that hoa v'gamar kicha kicha mistei Ephron, that since we have a gzeira shalom of kicha kicha mistei Ephron, and therefore masade mekanya bechalipin, I can buy a field with chalipin. If you and I are making a transaction, we can use a handkerchief to do the actual kinyan. So I might have thought af isha nami mekanya bechalipin, that a woman could also be niknes bekedushin bechalipin. Kamash malan, that does not work. Says the Gemara, why doesn't it work? Why can't we use Rav Huna? Why can't we use a handkerchief Why can't we use the cap that I just picked up? Use anything. Why doesn't the Kinyan Chalipin work? Perhaps we should say that a Kinyan Chalipin works beautifully. You can buy a $5 million field, but you can't get married to a woman because of it's a Kinyan Chalipin, according to Rav Huna. So says the Gemara, because, and this is a very important lumdus, the Gemara calls us out on something. It says, Chalipin isnahu b'pachos mishava pruta. When we do Chalipin, the halacha is that the item that's being used for Chalipin does not have to be a shava pruta. It could be even less than a shava pruta. And therefore, by Chalipin, it works, but in other fields, but not by a woman. Why not by a woman? Because V'isha, V'pachos mishava pruta, turning to the top of Gimel Amud Beis, lo makanya nafsha. That's a busha v'cherpa. A woman would not get proposed to with something that is less than a shava pruta. And therefore, says Rav Huna, the reason why we exclude a case of Chalipin is because Chalipin doesn't have a minimum cost of the item that's being used for Chalipin. So if I take a handkerchief out of my pocket and it is worth 1 penny, and I say, Haread Mekudeshasli, on the condition that I raise this up in your honor, 0, because it's not a Shava Pruta. Even if it would be a Shava Pruta, we wouldn't allow it because Chalipin tolerates a lower threshold of even Pachos Mishava Pruta. That's why Rav Huna says it doesn't work. So we've answered question number 1. Either the reason why it says 3 in our Mishnah is to preclude the possibility of chuppah, or according to Rav Huna, who says the chuppah is a good form of Kiddushin, he is precluding a case of Chalipin. And on the top of Gimel Amud Beis, and we'll be going to the top of Daled Amud Aleph about 5 lines down, on the top of Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Minyana de Seifa, when it says that a woman is kona es atzma b'shtei drachem, Minyana de Seifa l'ma'utei mai, what is it that number is coming to preclude? What is it that doesn't give a woman freedom? So says the Gemara, l'ma'utei chalitza. If you are a regular woman, and you do the process of chalitza that a yavama would typically do, you're still married. You saw a movie about chalitza, you sat in Daf Yomi, you know how chalitza works, and you hate your husband, and you go do the spitting and the shiur, the whole thing that we learned. It doesn't matter. Chalitza doesn't work for a regular woman. Chalitza only works for a yavama who's trying to get out of yibum. So therefore, Lemeute Chalitza comes to teach us as follows, that if you are a regular woman, there are 2 ways to gain your freedom back: divorce and death. And since this is neither of those, you are instead trying to do chalitza. That's a method of extraction from a marriage that doesn't apply to a regular woman. That is what is meant to be excluded. Sal kadai techamina. I might have thought, says the Gemara, Teisi bekal v'chomer miyavama. I might have thought that there's a kal v'chomer that we should allow for chalitza by a regular woman. What's the havamina that we should have thought that perhaps chalitza works by a regular woman? Says the Gemara 3 lines down on Gimel Amud Beis. Ma yavama she'ena yotza beget yotza bechalitza. A yavama, a woman who is awaiting marriage to her yava, and she wants to get divorced by a regular get, and it doesn't work, but by her chalitza does work. So then zu, a regular woman, sheyotza beget, who does get divorced by a get, eino din sheyotza bechalitza, all the more so chalitza should work. And says the Gemara, kamash malan, that that's not true, that a regular woman cannot get divorced with chalitza. Says the Gemara, ve'ema hachanami, perhaps we should say, in fact, that a woman does get divorced with chalitza. Says the Gemara, no, amar kra, that in regards to a regular woman, what is her parameter for divorce? Says the Gemara, how can she be kona es atzma? The pasuk says, sefer krisus, sefer korsa, ve'ein davar acher korsa. Fascinating, because what that means that by a regular woman, we have a din of krisus to divorce them, but by chalitza, we don't have a din of krisus. It's a different modality in halacha. By a regular woman, we need sefer korsa. We need a get. There's no other, and death. Those are the only 2 that get her out of marriage. You want to use chalitza? Chalitza is not midin krisus. Chalitza is not midin severance of the marriage in the classical way that we would assume. And therefore, when our Mishnah says v'kona es atzma b'shtei drachim, the word b'shtei means only these 2 ways. What are we excluding? We're excluding chalitza. That a regular woman who's not a yavama, she should not assume that divorce can take place with chalitza. Kaftor v'ferach, very clean. The Gemara says b'kasef. We know that a woman can get married with kasef. So says the Gemara Mindale, how do we know that kasef works? Please excuse my yawning. I don't know why I'm more tired than usual. Says the Gemara, how do we know that kasef works? And furthermore, haditnan, we have a Mishnah. Ha'av zakai bebito bekidusheha. The father merits and benefits from the money that comes in Kiddushin. Let's say that the boy marries the girl, Harei at Mekudeshesli, with $1 million Kedas Moshe Yisrael. That money which comes in Kiddushin goes to the father. Bekesef b'shtar ubebiya, and minalan demekanya bekesef davu. How do we know that the money goes to the father? So the Gemara is asking two questions. Number one is, how do we know that kesef is sufficient for a kinyan Kiddushin? And number two, how do we know that the money goes to the father? So the Gemara says about 10 lines down, Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Rav, because the Amar Kra, we have a pasuk that says by an Ama Ivriya, v'yatza chinam ein kasef, that when she goes free, there's no money. Ein kesef la'adon zeh. When she goes free, the money doesn't go to the Baal of the Ama Ivriya, to the master. However, aval yesh kesef la'adon acher. But there is a case scenario where a master does in fact get money. Uman nihu. What case is that where the father does get money? That must be the case of an Av in regards to his daughter. So that's what the Gemara says from Ama Ivriya. That's what the Gemara says, is that we learn from Av and Ivriya where no money changes hands, that there must be a case where money does change hands and goes to the master. What case of this is a master? It's not actually a master, but it's a father. And that is that when a girl gets married and there's Kiddushin and there's money that comes in from the Kiddushin, it goes to the father. Perhaps we should say that really the money should go to the girl. She's the one getting married. Why is the father getting the Kiddushin? So says the Gemara, Hachi Hashta, how can this be? Or according to some girsos, it's not hachi hashta, it's hashta avia mekabel kiddusheha. We know that the father receives kiddushin. V'chsiv es biti nosati li'ishazeh. I gave my daughter to this man. V'ihi shakla kaspa. If he's the one who gave over his daughter, she should be the one that gets money. That makes no sense. Of course, he should get the money. The Gemara questions, Ve'ema, perhaps we should say that Hani Mili, that when is it do we say that the money goes to the father during Kiddushin? That's only true Ketana by a young girl, the less le yad lekabel Kiddushin, because she's a child. She doesn't have a yad to be makabel Kiddushin. Aval naira, but when you're a little bit older, so then perhaps the isla yad lekabel Kiddushin, perhaps tiktish ihi nafsha v'tishkol kaspa. Perhaps then a woman, a girl, I should say, a nara, could get married herself and then keep the Kiddushin. Says the Gemara, that's for sure not true, because we have another pasuk that accompanies the previous pasuk. We started with the pasuk of Yatzei Chinam En Kasef, and now, out of concern that perhaps we might have thought that a nara is allowed to get married herself and keep the money for Kiddushin, says the Gemara, Amar Kra, 2/3 of the way down, bin ureha beis avia, that the nu'ureha, the young girl in the beis avia, kol shvach nu'urim le'avia, all of the benefits, even of a naira, even of a woman who's a girl who's a little bit older, that is le'aviha. So the Gemara's Havamina right now is that we know kesef works and that it goes to the father because of this seeming combination of psukim. Number one, v'yatza chinam ein kasef, and as well, ureha beis aviha. So says the Gemara as follows, 12 lines from the bottom. I don't understand. Ve'alahada amar Rav Huna amar Rav. We learned the din of Rav. What did Rav teach us? Minayin shemaise habas le'av. How do we know that the proceeds of the daughter go to the father? Shenemar v'chim kor ishes bito le'ama, from a different pasuk altogether. Ma'ama, just like a maidservant. Ma'ise yodeh le'rabba. All of her proceeds go to her master. Av bas nami ma'ise yodeh le'avia. Says the Gemara, obviously over here, that the same would be true from a daughter, that her ma'ase yodeh, including her kiddushin, go to the father. So says the Gemara, why did Rav need to teach this din? We already learned this idea, Rav. Why would Rav teach a statement that the father gets the daughter's kiddushin money when we just learned it from a pasuk 5 lines ago? We just concluded that from the pasuk of B'nei Ureha Beis Avia, we proved that even a nara, even a girl who's slightly older, who does have a yad, she's able to receive money. We still say that her money goes to her father. So if it's true that B'nei Ureha Beis Avia teaches us that the father gets the money for Kiddushin, why did Rav teach this line to teach us of Af Bas Nami Ma'aseh Yodeh Le'avia? We should have learned it from B'nei Ureha Beis Avia. Ella, says the Gemara, it must be that we're talking about Faras Nadarim Hu Dechsiv. What was Rav concerned about? That B'nei Ureha Beis Avia was a pasuk talking about Nadarim. It wasn't a pasuk talking about marriage. So Rav had to teach us an explicit din to make sure we knew that we extended from the world of Nadarim even into the world of Kiddushin. And says the Gemara, Hachanami, in our case too, we should have said that about Faras Nadarim hu dechsiv, that when our Gemara quoted the pasuk of Binu Ureha Beis Avia to teach us that a father gets the Kiddushin of his daughter, when that's true, we should not have accepted it at face value. We should have accepted the context of the pasuk and said, hey, this is talking about Hafaras Nadarim. Why in the world would we assume that the father gets the money based on the pasuk of Binu Ureha Beis Avia, when the pasuk of Binu Ureha Beis Avia isn't even talking about marriage? So we're back to a really tough point in the Gemara, which is, what is our source that a father gets to keep the Kiddushin of his daughter? Because the pasuk that you just quoted, Binu Ureha Beis Avia, is not talking about Kiddushin. It's talking about Hafaras Nadarim, which was why Rav had to make that comment in the first place. So the same question should be applied by us. How do we know that Binu Ureha Beis Avia teaches us anything? V'chi teima. And if you want to say neilaf mina, that we can learn that just like a father benefits from, or really has control by Hafaras Nadarim, so too by Kiddushin he gets the money. That can't be. Because, and this is a Shas concept, mamona me isura lo yalfinan. We cannot learn out a din of the father taking money of the Kiddushin of his daughter in a case scenario where the source is isura. Mammon is one world, and Isser is another world. Mammon is the world of Kiddushin that we're discussing. Does the father get the Kiddushin? And the world of Isser is the world of Hafaras Nadarim. And therefore, it's oil and water. You can't learn one thing from another because Mamona me isura lo yalfinan. And the chitema nelef miknasa. Maybe we should say, when the psukim speak about a woman who is mafuta or me'oneses, when a woman was violated or seduced, so there the money is given to the father too. Perhaps we should be able to learn, says the Gemara, from the world of knas, that just like the father collects the knas when the daughter is violated, perhaps we should also say by Kiddushin, that when a father collects money for Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter, the father keeps it. Says the Gemara, can't do that either. Because mamona miknasa lo yalfina. The world of mammon cannot be learned from the world of knas, oil and water again, and therefore no dice. Let's try the third time. 3 lines from the bottom on Gimel Amud Beis. V'chi tema neilaf mi boshes upigam. Perhaps we should say that in regards to boshes and pigam, 2 types of payments that are made to a woman if she's embarrassed or injured, so there the money goes to the father. Perhaps we should say that this is the Mari Makom as to why the money in Kiddushin should go to the father. Says the Gemara, no. Shani Bosha Subgam De'avua Shach Begavai. That applies to the father also. When the daughter's embarrassed, the father's embarrassed too. So therefore, no raya one way or the other. Ella, says the Gemara, how do we know that a father gets Kiddushin money? How do we know that it goes to him and not to her? Back to where we started, Elamistabra, Rashi. Rashi says 4 lines from the bottom, Ela la'olam mikra kama, te'in kesef la'adon ze nafka. We learn out the din that a father gets Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter when they get married from the initial pasuk that we started with. The initial pasuk that we started with toward the top of this page was the pasuk of Yatza Chinam Ein Kasef. We had said by a maidservant that no money changes hands. And the Gemara made a diuk that it's true by maidservants that no money changes hands, but money does change hands by Kiddushin and the father gets to keep it. That's where we learn it from. And says the Gemara, Elamistabra dechika mima'et yitzia dekavasa kamima'et. When we are talking about a case of Yitzia, we're talking about, in the first case, an Ama Ivriya. That's one case, number 1. And then the second case we're talking about is in regards to Kiddushin. So the cases have to be similar where the money goes to the master. In this case, the money goes to the father. Says the Gemara, those 2 cases that you're comparing of Erusin and Ama Ivriya are not the same. V'halo damya ha-Yitzia la-ha-Yitzia. Hasam, in regards to the case of an Ama Ivriya when she's freed, there, nafkala merishus adon legamre. When that relationship is over, it's completely over. But when it comes to a woman who got engaged, v'hacha, in regards to engagement, she's not totally separated from her father yet. V'hacha akati michsera mesira lechuppah. When a woman is engaged, only halachically engaged, she's not totally separated from her father because she's only engaged and not fully married. So says the Gemara, the case of Ama Ivriya and the case of Kiddushin are not exactly the same. When a woman is an Ama Ivriya and she's separated from her master halachically, there's no tethering anymore between the 2. However, when it comes to Kiddushin, when a woman is only halachically engaged, the din is that she still has to go through chuppah, so she still is tethered to her father in a way, and that Kiddushin is not a full separation. Says the Gemara, don't worry. And with this, we'll close 4 lines down on Dalet Amud Aleph. You're right. But when a woman is engaged, there is one space where she is separated from her father properly. Says the Gemara, V'afaras nedarim miha nafkala mirishuse. When it comes to afaras nedarim, a woman who's engaged is in fact separated from her father. Ditnan. The Mishnah writes, Na'ara me'urasa, that when a woman is even only engaged, there still is enough of a connection where a father is still involved. So that's why the Gemara doesn't really like this answer that we learn out everything from Yatzah Chinam in Kasef. And as you can see in the next words, we're going to continue this tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.